Here is something most people never learn in their whole lives. The way you reheat your leftovers, a habit you probably repeat a few times a week without giving it a single thought, can quietly change the chemistry of the food sitting on your plate. And 5 very ordinary foods, the kind in almost every fridge in America, do something surprising when they hit the heat a second time. They start producing compounds that put real pressure on one of the most important and most ignored organs in your whole body, your pancreas. Quick reminder of what this organ even does, because most people are a little fuzzy on it. Your pancreas has 2 enormous jobs. It makes the enzymes that break down the food you eat, and it makes insulin, the hormone that keeps your blood sugar under control. When it struggles, both your digestion and your blood sugar feel it. So this is not some minor side organ tucked away where it doesn't matter. This is a control center, and it's one you really don't want to wear down. And here is the part that catches people off guard. Your pancreas almost never complains. It does not ache, it does not cramp, it does not throw up a flashing warning sign when something is going wrong. It just keeps doing its job in total silence, which is exactly why what you are about to learn is worth your time. Pancreatic cancer is one of the hardest diagnoses in modern medicine. Fewer than 1 in 8 people are still alive 5 years after they hear it. A big part of why it stays so dangerous is that the pancreas keeps quiet until very late in the game. So the single smartest thing you can do is give it less to deal with in the first place. Now for the good news, because there is plenty of it. Every one of these 5 foods has a simple fix. Nothing dramatic, nothing expensive, just one different choice the next time you open the refrigerator door. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you will know exactly what those choices are. If clear, honest health information is what you came for, hit subscribe and tap like. It helps more people find this channel, and the goal here is 300,000 subscribers. Checklists and extra health posts go out on my Telegram, and the QR code is on your screen right now. Let's start with the one that surprises people the most, and it begins with oil. Picture last night's dinner. A few fried chicken pieces, some fries, maybe a spring roll. You don't want to throw good food away. That's reasonable. Most of us were raised not to waste. So you pop it in the microwave, or even more tempting, you drop it back into a pan with a little fresh oil to bring back that crispy edge. And right at that moment, you kick off a chemical process your pancreas is almost defenseless against. Here's what's happening. The everyday vegetable oils most of us keep on the shelf, sunflower, corn, soybean, are surprisingly unstable when they get hot. Even the first time you fry with them, they start to break down a little. Heat them a second time and you trigger something food chemists call oxidative breakdown. The oil literally starts falling apart at the molecular level. That process spits out a group of toxic compounds called aldehydes. 2 of the rougher ones go by the names 4-hydroxynonenal and malondialdehyde. You don't need to memorize those. You just need to know what they do. And it helps to understand why these oils are so fragile in the first place. They're high in what are called polyunsaturated fats, a type of fat with a delicate chemical structure that reacts very easily with oxygen, especially under heat. The more times you heat them, the more they react, and the more of those toxic byproducts you end up creating. So the second fry isn't just a repeat of the first, it's worse. When reheated oil breaks down like this, it releases free radicals. Think of them as tiny sparks flying off an unattended fire, each one shooting off in a random direction and slamming into healthy cells. They tear at those cells from the inside, and that includes your DNA. Your DNA is the instruction manual inside every cell. It tells each one how to grow, when to stop, and when to quietly retire to make room for new cells. When that manual gets damaged enough times, a cell can stop following the rules. It starts dividing when it shouldn't. That is the very beginning of how cancer gets started. Your pancreas is especially exposed to this kind of damage. Every time you eat something fried and reheated in oil, your body fires up an inflammatory response to try to contain the harm. That part is normal, that's protection. But if you're reheating fried food a few times a week, that inflammation never really switches off. A pancreas stuck in constant low-grade inflammation is an organ trying to do delicate, precise work while smoke fills the room. Every enzyme it makes, every hormone signal it sends, has to happen in conditions it was never built for. And you might be feeling small hints of this already. A dull, heavy feeling in your upper belly after a meal that you write off as just eating too much. A strange wave of tiredness right after you eat that you blame on a long day. A vague ache under your ribs that comes and goes, the kind you label as bad digestion. Sometimes it really is just digestion, but sometimes it's worth paying closer attention to. There's a pattern that shows up in primary care more often than you'd expect. Take someone like Linda, 58, careful with money, hates waste. 2 or 3 evenings a week, she'd reheat the previous night's fried dinner in a hot, oily skillet, proud of herself for not letting food go bad. She kept mentioning that same vague heaviness in her upper abdomen, the kind that never quite became a real problem, but never quite went away either. Nothing dramatic ever showed up on any test, but the daily chemistry of those reheated, re-oiled meals was doing quiet work in the background. That's exactly the kind of thing that rarely sends a person running to the doctor, and that's what makes it so easy to miss. So what actually helps here? The first rule is simple, and it's worth treating as non-negotiable. Don't reheat fried food in oil. Not fresh oil, not the same oil from before. If you want that crispy texture back, dry heat is your friend. A regular oven set around 350 degrees or an air fryer brings the crunch right back without adding a single drop of new chemical damage. And as a second habit a lot of people find easy to adopt, treat frying oil as one-time use. Fry today, pour it out today. When you stack the price of a bottle of oil against the cost of pancreatic disease, the math makes itself. Now the second food, and this one genuinely throws people because for years it has sat at the very top of every healthy eating list out there. The kind of list even nutrition experts repeat without a second thought. Picture a Sunday night. You saute some spinach with garlic and a little olive oil, dark green, perfectly cooked, and you feel great about it. You're eating right, you're taking care of yourself, you box up the extra and put it in the fridge. Monday at lunch, you pull it out, 90 seconds in the microwave, done. Looks the same, smells the same, tastes the same, but that second round of heat just set off a reaction inside that spinach that the World Health Organization formally links to cancer risk. Here's the chain of events. Leafy greens, spinach, kale, chard, arugula, naturally contain compounds called nitrates. Fresh, they're completely harmless. But once you've cooked those greens and let them sit, ordinary bacteria already present in the food start converting those harmless nitrates into nitrites. Then, when you apply heat a second time, those nitrites react with the amino acids in the food and form a new group of compounds called nitrosamines. That's the word to hang on to, nitrosamines. The International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is the World Health Organization's dedicated cancer agency, classifies many nitrosamines as probable human carcinogens. They're also what scientists call genotoxic, which simply means they can slip straight into the nucleus of a cell and damage the DNA directly. Not from the outside, but right at the genetic controls. Picture your DNA as the master blueprint your body uses to build and repair everything inside you. Nitrosamines are like someone sneaking into the blueprint room every few days and erasing one instruction, changing one measurement. Your built-in repair crews catch most of these errors, but not every single one. Over months and years, the damage that slips through can start producing cells that don't behave the way they should. And here's why this matters for the pancreas specifically. Once your body absorbs those nitrosamines from that reheated spinach, they travel through your whole system. Your pancreas gets pulled into the cleanup process again and again. Week after week, it finds itself working in a chemical environment it has to keep neutralizing under steady, low-level stress. The fix could not be easier, and it might surprise you. Eat your cooked greens cold. Cold spinach folded into a grain bowl, tossed into a salad, rolled into a wrap, every bit of the nutrition is still there. No second heating means no nitrosamines forming, full stop. And if you really want them warm, the move a lot of people land on is to cook only what you'll eat right then. Not a week's worth, just this one meal. If you do reheat, reheat once and only once. Every additional round of heat multiplies the nitrosamines that form. That's not a scare tactic, that's just chemistry. The third food looks the most innocent of all. No sharp taste, no strong smell. You couldn't detect the risk with any of your senses if you tried. A pot of rice you cooked a few days back, you made a big batch, it's just easier that way. Each day you heat up a portion. Everybody does this. There's a pot of leftover rice in kitchens all over the planet. But from the moment that rice cools down after cooking, something biological starts unfolding inside it that almost nobody ever gets told about. Let me introduce you to a bacterium called Bacillus cereus. It rides along in raw rice from basically any grocery store, anywhere. Cooking kills the active bacteria, but it does not kill the spores. A spore is a tough little survival capsule that certain bacteria form specifically to ride out conditions that would normally destroy them. Boiling water doesn't faze them. Standard cooking temperatures don't faze them. They just sit quietly in your perfectly cooked rice, invisible and undetectable, waiting for the temperature to drop into their favorite range for multiplying, which happens to be right about the temperature of your kitchen counter as the rice cools. Once it cools, those spores wake up, they divide, they produce toxins. And here's the detail that matters most. One of those toxins is heat stable. So the next day when you microwave that rice, you do kill the living bacteria, but the toxin they already made while they were multiplying sails right through the reheating untouched and lands in your body fully active. Here's a simple way to picture it. Imagine a hidden factory pumping out a toxic chemical down in your basement. You find it and shut it down. You cut the power to every machine. But the barrels it already filled before you got there are still sitting in the warehouse. Your microwave shut down the factory, but the barrels are already on your plate. So where does the pancreas come in? Repeated exposure to these toxins, even small doses, even without a full-blown bout of food poisoning every single time, can create low-grade, ongoing inflammation in your gut. And researchers are paying more and more attention to the links between long-term gut inflammation and the health of nearby organs, including the pancreas. The two are closely connected. They share blood supply, they share lymphatic drainage, and they share the same inflammatory signaling pathways. A gut that stays chronically irritated tends to pass those inflammatory signals right along to the pancreas. Food safety investigators have a name for this exact situation, and the backstory is almost always identical. Picture someone like James, 26, fresh out of college, meal prepping to save time and money. Sunday he cooks a big pot of rice, leaves it on the counter to cool for a couple of hours while he does other things, then portions it out for the week. The rice that sat out the longest is the one most likely to carry that heat-stable toxin, and no amount of microwaving fixes it. It's a genuinely well-documented scenario, and the fix comes down to timing more than anything else. So here's the practical approach. Cool cooked rice within about 1 hour of making it. Spread it out in a wide, thin layer instead of leaving it in a tall heap. More surface area means it cools faster, which gives those spores less time to switch on. Keep it no longer than 24 hours. When you reheat, heat it all the way through until it's steaming throughout, and then eat the whole portion. Once you've reheated it, don't put it back in the fridge for round 2. Simple rules, and most people just never had anyone explain them. The fourth food shows up in most households several times a week, and the danger here doesn't come from the chicken itself. It comes from one quirk of the most common appliance in your kitchen, a quirk that creates invisible zones inside your food that look perfectly safe from the outside. You reheat a couple of chicken thighs from last night, 2 pieces, microwave 2 minutes. You touch the outside, hot. You eat. That's a standard lunch in millions of homes, and right there in that it's hot on the outside so it must be done logic is where the risk hides. A microwave doesn't heat food the way an oven does. It excites the water molecules inside the food, and those molecules generate heat on their own. But different parts of a single piece of chicken hold different amounts of water, have different density, and carry their fat in different spots. Some parts get hot enough to kill bacteria. Other parts, sometimes just an inch away, stay at a temperature where bacteria don't just survive, they happily multiply. These are called cold zones. You can't see them, you can't feel them. The outside can be scalding while the inside sits at exactly the temperature dangerous bacteria love most. 2 bugs make this especially worth taking seriously with chicken: Salmonella and Campylobacter. Both are common in raw poultry. Cooking it properly the first time wipes them out, but recontamination after cooking is easy. Through your hands, a cutting board, a shared utensil, and a cold zone in your microwave is a warm, moist, protein-rich little pocket. That's not a place where bacteria die. That's an incubator. A salmonella infection is not a mild 2-hour stomachache. It's a whole body event with high fever, hard cramps, relentless vomiting, diarrhea. Your entire immune system goes to war. And while that war is being fought in your gut, your pancreas doesn't sit it out. It gets pulled into the inflammatory response too. But here's what concerns me more than the occasional dramatic case of food poisoning: the repeated small doses. The ones too mild to knock you flat, but just enough to keep your gut smoldering with low-grade inflammation. Those quietly add up, year after year, into conditions the pancreas struggles to climb back out of. Here's the kind of scenario that turns up in clinical notes again and again. Someone like Carol, 49, busy, microwaving leftover chicken at her desk most days because it's fast. No single meal ever made her sick enough to stay home, but that steady drip of slightly undercooked, reheated chicken with those hidden cold zones is exactly the kind of low-level exposure that does its damage slowly and without any fanfare. So how do you handle it? The oven is the safe bet. Set it around 350 degrees, cover the chicken tightly with foil, and give it 15 to 20 minutes. The trapped, moist heat reaches every part evenly, no cold zones. If you're set on the microwave, cut the chicken into small, even pieces, use medium power instead of full blast, stop halfway through and stir everything around. And after heating, cover it and let it rest for 2 full minutes. Or skip the whole problem and eat it cold. Chicken pulled into a salad straight from the fridge carries zero reheating risk. No cold zones, no inflammatory cascade heading toward your pancreas. And now the fifth food. This one is unique because it carries not one, but 2 completely separate chemical threats, and they happen at the same time. 2 different hits to your pancreas from a single plate of leftovers. Roasted potatoes from last Sunday. Golden, crispy outside, fluffy inside. You made a whole tray. Monday evening, you pull them out and toss them back into an oiled pan to crisp them up again. You feel like a thrifty, sensible person. Meanwhile, 2 independent chemical processes are running inside those potatoes, coming at your pancreas from 2 directions. The first is a compound called acrylamide. The International Agency for Research on Cancer classifies it as a probable human carcinogen. Acrylamide forms in starchy foods when they're heated above roughly 250 degrees. That golden crust you love on a roast potato, that crispy surface, is the result of something called the Maillard reaction, and acrylamide forms as part of that very same reaction. But here's what makes reheated potatoes worse than fresh ones. After the first cooking and cooling, the surface of the potato dries out. The sugars and amino acids concentrate on that dry surface. So when you blast it with high heat a second time, the chemical conditions for forming acrylamide are even more favorable than they were the first time around. Which means you can end up with a noticeably higher dose of that carcinogen from reheated potatoes than from freshly made ones. That's the first hit, a direct chemical hit on the cells of your pancreas. Now the second hit, and this one wears the pancreas down quietly over years. When a cooked potato fully cools in the fridge, something genuinely useful happens. Part of its ordinary starch transforms into something called resistant starch. Resistant starch is a form of starch your small intestine can't break down quickly. It raises your blood sugar only gently. It slows down how fast glucose gets absorbed. It even feeds the helpful bacteria in your gut. A cold cooked potato is, in metabolic terms, a completely different food from a hot one. But the moment you reheat it on high heat, that resistant starch flips back into regular, fast-digesting starch. The protective change that happened while it cooled gets undone in about 90 seconds in the microwave. What was gentle on your blood sugar is now a sharp glucose spike. And who has to deal with that spike? Your pancreas, specifically the beta cells, the ones that make insulin. They're forced to fire off a sudden, large emergency surge. Once in a while, that's completely fine. That's exactly what they're built for. But 3 times a week, every week, for years, is chronic overload on those beta cells. They get worn down, they become less responsive, they start to degrade. And the steady wearing down of insulin-producing cells is a documented path toward the kind of chronic conditions that can come before serious pancreatic disease. 2 hits at the same time every single time you reheat those potatoes. And if you also crisp them in oil, you stack the very first food's risks right on top, maximum acrylamide plus maximum oil breakdown. Basically every hazard in this whole video concentrated onto one plate. This comes up in medical records more than most people would ever guess. Picture someone like Mike, 62, a meat and potatoes guy his whole life, refrying Sunday's roast potatoes in a buttery, oily pan a few nights a week because that's just how he's always done it. Each plate on its own looks like nothing, but that combination, extra acrylamide plus a blood sugar spike plus oxidized oil, repeated for years, is a heavier load on the pancreas than almost anything else on his table. And here's something genuinely important because age changes this whole picture. As you move past your 40s, your pancreas tends to bounce back from this kind of chronic stress more slowly than it did in your 20s and 30s. The capacity of those insulin-making cells to recover declines, and the body's detox reserves shrink. So every additional year of accumulated exposure carries more weight than it used to. Tell me in the comments, how old are you? It genuinely helps me understand which age group this matters most for, so I can shape the next videos around the people who are actually watching. As for what to do with potatoes, eat them cold wherever you can. A cold potato salad with good olive oil, a splash of vinegar, some fresh herbs. It sounds odd until you actually try it. You keep all that resistant starch, you skip the extra acrylamide, and you hand your pancreas's beta cells a job they don't have to fight through. If you need them warm, steam them or use the lowest heat you can. Warm, not piping hot, just enough to take the chill off. And never, under any circumstances, refry a potato that's already been cooked. A fresh potato fried once is a completely different chemical story from a cooked potato fried twice. So that's all 5, and before we wrap up, I want to tell you something that matters. If you've been doing every one of these things for years, it is not too late. The human body's ability to repair itself genuinely impresses me the more I learn about it. Chronic inflammation can come back down. Damaged cells get replaced by new ones constantly. Everything we talked about today is not a verdict, it's a starting point. I'm not asking you to walk away from this scared. Fear just freezes people in place. I'm asking you to walk away with something concrete and useful, enough to make one different choice tonight. When you open the fridge, fried food gets dry heat in the oven or air fryer, never oil. Leafy greens go cold, or you cook just enough for one meal. Rice gets cooled within an hour, kept no more than a day, reheated until it's steaming, and finished in one sitting. Chicken goes in the oven or gets eaten cold. Potatoes go cold wherever possible or warmed gently at the lowest heat. Small habits, done consistently over months and years, genuinely change what happens inside your body. Your pancreas works for you every single day in complete silence. It never asks for anything. Maybe it's time to start giving a little something back. Here on Dr. Waterling, the goal never changes. Make the science make sense and hand you something you can actually use. And remember, everything here is general education, not a personal diagnosis. Your situation is your own, so let a doctor who knows your full health picture be the one to guide any real changes. If this gave you something useful, subscribe and leave a like. That's how this channel keeps climbing toward 300,000 and helps more people find clear health information. Grab the practical checklist on my Telegram and the QR code is right here on your screen.